Ladies and gentlemen of the DCU, welcome to a brand new DCU Chapter 1 video. The last time I made one of these was roughly almost a month ago, and what I've done now is I've said since the Flash movie trailer has been out for a little while now, and taking into account everything since the DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters announcement from James Gunn and the details we've learned there, what we do here, similar to other discussion series on the channel, we talk about theories, ideas, speculation. There's a lot up in the air despite how many answers we've been given. It's kind of the thing where the more answers we get, the more questions we have. But since the DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters announcement video, we've also got the Flash trailer. So we're going to toss some questions about that in here because, you know, the Flash does technically reset the entire DC universe and just take it from there. So I've got a bunch of your questions that I want to feature in this video. So let's start with question number 1 from Morgie39. If Superman Legacy was already in the works pre-Gunn/Safran, was it intended as a standalone Elseworlds project? So maybe not everyone knows exactly what is going on here, but we found out, and I made a video about this last week. I gathered, as I do sometimes when James Gunn replies on Twitter, there's quite a bit to talk about because sometimes you might say something which I don't think you realized that nobody actually knew about before, like properly, and this was one of them. So if you guys remember, during recent Warner Brothers history, we had Black Adam, of course, with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and they managed to get Henry Cavill's Superman to cameo in that movie. Now, at the time, Warner Brothers leadership under David Zaslav was Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi. These two higher-ups at Warner Brothers were essentially filling the role of DCU leadership until David Zaslav could find who he wanted in that role, and it turned out to eventually be James Gunn and Peter Safran. Now, James Gunn at this point had already directed the Suicide Squad for Warner Brothers, but also we found out he was writing and penning the treatment for Superman Legacy, and he said he was hired for that and has been working on that for 6+ months. Now that takes us all the way back until August of 2022. Now during this time, this is when everything was like piping up for the Superman appearance in Black Adam, which is why this makes this a little bit of a bag of worms, because it's like, wait, okay, what was going on? Because no matter what way you look at it, there's been such a mishandling here. You had Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi who were holding the reins for all decisions like this. They knew they were going to get leadership coming in sometime soon, right? And maybe there was even inside chatter that, oh, James Gunn, who's writing Superman Legacy right now in August, he could actually be in talks for the leadership position. Either way, they, you know, you have to assume it was them. They allowed Black Adam to have Superman in that movie, all while as well we're getting a Black Superman movie written by Ta-Nehisi Coates. What's going on with that? Apparently it's still in active development. But the main question here that Morgie asks, if Superman Legacy was already in the works pre-Gunn/Safran, so pre-Gunn and Safran meaning the leadership, but Gunn was technically there still working for the studio, just like he did with the Suicide Squad, was it intended as a standalone/Elseworlds project? I don't know. Like, who knows what the heck is going on there? I just wanted to mention this because it just highlights to you, like, wow, look at, like, everything that was unfolding there. They were trying to keep Cavill in the DCEU, even though there was new leadership coming in who might not agree with that, but they were like, yeah, sure, do that. But then Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi must have been aware of what James Gunn was doing quite literally at the same time, and that was writing a Superman movie. So my only speculation with this is that maybe, and I struggle to believe that they would have not had any communication about this, but maybe they thought that Superman Legacy could have been the next Superman movie regardless of who the Superman actor is. So if they allowed Henry Cavill to be coming back in Black Adam, maybe they assumed, I don't like saying that because like surely they would have had some more firm talks, but either way, my only logical reasoning here is that maybe they thought, well, if Henry Cavill's coming back, that early penning or treatment for Superman Legacy by James Gunn, which has been taking place since August, so before Black Adam even came out, before Henry Cavill's Superman was even in the movie, that they thought that maybe that would be Henry Cavill's movie, just maybe it might go through some changes when he's actually officially on board, and then he did officially come on board, but then it's like, oh, no, wait, James Gunn, who was writing Superman Legacy back in August 2022, is the new leader, and he doesn't want Henry Cavill's Superman anymore because of a different vision, apparently. It's just weird, and it's just a bit bit strange to me. I feel like we need more clarity. I've got a feeling James Gunn would say, yeah, the Superman Legacy script I was writing back in August of 2022, so 6+ months ago, wasn't actually in mind with Henry Cavill. And if that was definitively said, and I think that is kind of the truth, then it is kind of like even worse when you look at the lens of then why did they allow Henry Cavill to shoot cameo scenes to set up his return and announce his return, by the way, on social media in Black Adam in November. It's just a massive mess. I know I've kind of danced around the subject and not specifically answered, was it intended as a standalone / Elseworlds? It's just when you crack open this case a bit, it is truly a weird one. Really, really strange. So bottom line here, despite the logical side being what I've already said, maybe it was being written and whoever was going to be the next Superman, whether it was Henry Cavill or not, was intended to be playing that role in Superman Legacy. I've got a feeling that James Gunn was hired in, well, around August or before August to write that movie, but was writing it in August of 2022. September goes by, October goes by, he's still writing Superman Legacy, but all while that's happening, they get Henry Cavill in to shoot a setup scene for the future of the DCEU at the time for his Superman returning. Even though all of that was happening, I do believe that this Superman in Superman Legacy being written by James Gunn way back then was meant to be a new Superman, and maybe that bottom provisional line was going to be it was a new Superman regardless, because after the Flash movie came about and the original regime back then, the direction was to keep on Michael Keaton, have a Batgirl, Supergirl was staying on with Sasha Calle. I suspect that yes, Superman Legacy being written way back last year before Black Adam was meant to be a new Superman. It's just they were going to maybe use the Flash movie as a bit of an excuse to be like, oh look, a different looking Superman. Now, obviously, at that time, nothing had landed firmly on the floor. They were still likely figuring things out. Don't forget, Batgirl got cancelled. Michael Keaton was no longer staying as the Batman post the Flash movie whenever Barry tries to set things right, but nothing quite remains the same. So that was the thing that was always going to stay. The Flash movie, no matter what they were doing as the post-universe, when Barry fixes the timeline, that I think has always been the factor of whether they keep Keaton as Batman or not, or whether they keep Sasha Calle as Supergirl or not. It's still like, well, this new Superman Legacy movie I've been writing since August, the Flash movie could still, when Barry runs back at the end of the movie to try and correct things, give me that excuse for a new face. It's just ridiculous how you obviously had Black Adam trying to bring in Superman at the same time, and whoever it was at Warner Brothers at the time who allowed that to happen, it seems like a miscommunication across all sectors. But the only two names I can think of who would have allowed this to happen, other than Zaslav, but beneath Zaslav, who was meant to handle this stuff, I believe it was Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi. Alright, so up next, and by the way, if you like this video, if you haven't, I would really, really appreciate that, especially if you've made it to this second question in this video. But the next one is from Brutal Vengeance 267 saying, hey Boba, I was thinking on the DCU Batman. Is there a possibility that we will get the white eyes with this version of Batman? I think the white eyes will fit well with this Batman since it is in the fantastical world of the DCU. Plus, I think it would make a nice difference between Pattinson not having the white eyes and letting the DCU Batman have the white eyes. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks, man. Sorry for the lengthy question. No worries at all. I've read out much longer questions than that. I think it's an easy thing to kind of suggest this in terms of how it is almost this thing that would be very easy to think, oh, that's a cool thing that fans both want and don't want at the same time, and I'll get into that in a second. But if fans want it in one way, well, you can definitely give it to both sets of fans, if that makes sense. So the DC, or should I say the Elseworlds Batman under Reeves's Batverse won't have white eyes, and I'm pretty damn sure that he won't have white eyes in the Batman Part 2 or Part 3. I think, you know, I kind of land in the camp of both. I love the white eyes, but at the same time, you know, it's already hard enough acting without eyebrows under a Batman cowl. Obviously you can act, I'm not disputing that before anyone brings it up. It's just even Pattinson has gone to it himself, you know, believe it or not, eyebrows and the way they move are a huge part of the body language or expression or articulation and stuff. So taking away the actual eyeballs as well, sure, you can act with your demeanor and tilt your head and your chin and your jawline as Batman, and there's a lot of acting, and people might say, well, if you're good enough of an actor, you can definitely get that through. But Pattinson and seeing his eyes, it's one of the few things you have left to really help convey that emotion. Now, I'm not saying that with white eyes, and if we get that in the DCU Batman, given all that I've just said, we will be without that. I think you, to be fair to myself and what I've just said, you will in a certain way of speaking, but it depends how you're even tackling this character between scenes and just the movie and the format itself. So even in the DCU Batman, let's just say we did get white eyes, that would tick a lot of fans' boxes. Yes, it would also make this DCU version compared to that of the Elseworlds version quite separate or just distinct in a visual way. It would be comic accurate in a very fan-pleasing way as well, but it's not to say that we're not going to see loads of Bruce Wayne with Damian Wayne in The Brave and the Bold without his cowl on and things like that. I don't think white eyes are innately fantastical, so to speak, because, for example, I suppose you could say in the Batman, which is definitely a less fantastical, more grounded world, you could say that the contact lenses that Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne films with in the movie, they could have easily added how, if for some reason it blocks out the color of your eyes when recording, and that way you could have given that illusion of the white eyes look. So there is a way to make it be done in grounded, but sure, in the fantastical world, of which I think this is going to go leaps and bounds beyond the fantastical that you'll ever see in Matt Reeves' The Batman, it does feel a lot more natural to implement something like that. As I've always said, with a DCEU Batman like Ben Affleck's versus that of Matt Reeves's, you'd see him literally riding off the back of a parademon, flying in the sky, an actual alien. You won't see that in Robert Pattinson's movies. But in the DCU Batman, you can bet your ass there's going to be fantastical stuff, like villains, proper rogues gallery, blobby clay monster Clayface. Not saying we're going to get Clayface, but if we did, he would most likely be like that. So I do think that other aspects are going to be really far-fetched compared to a grounded world like Nolan's or Matt Reeves' Batman. And this brings up the whole Robin talk that we're going to get into a little bit later, I believe, in how, you know, it might be very, very, and this is like a, you know, general belief anyway. Not everyone shares this view, but if you bring a Robin to the screen, can you really do a 10, 11-year-old kid in a grounded way? I need to put that on like a highlighted mode, in a grounded way that feels like you can implement it in a natural, organic way, a realistic way. And sure, many people may argue with me right now saying you can, you really can, but I tend to believe for Matt Reeves' universe, you would have kind of a little bit of an aged up actor. Maybe they're a 19-year-old playing a 16-year-old kind of thing, but maybe in James Gunn's DCU, I do believe, if you've ever seen the film Kick-Ass, that with how far-fetched this universe is going to be in terms of a really comic book, no limits known to, you know, aliens coming in, powered people, with Batman in that world, then yes, you could have a hit girl from Kick-Ass type Damian Wayne happening on screen. And it's just the tone of the cinematic universe, even though they've made it clear that tones will be very specific to certain movies. I just think you get a bit more leeway when you're building up a universe, a DC universe with a Man of Steel out there, a Darkseid floating out there somewhere, Brainiac out there, other heroes like Green Lanterns and stuff like this. When none of that belongs in Matt Reeves' world, it's a bit easier to imagine, oh, hey, there's a kick-ass hit girl type kid, Robin. So yeah, I know this is like a long-winded thing to circle back to the white eyes, but I just wanted to kind of set the stage with how if you're having all of these other things going on, it's almost really not hard to believe that James Gunn, or whoever helms The Brave and the Bold, that's important to remember. I mean, James Gunn might say to the director, I kind of really want this Batman to have white eyes, and then they would adapt it on, but the director will have a lot of leeway, especially with James Gunn going on about maintaining creative vision for that of the directors of each movie. They'll be respected in that way. But white eyes would be really cool. I know I've been rambling about this one for a minute, but I think that would be good to do. I would actually vote for it because we've not really had it. Outside of some characters like Deadpool here and there and whatnot, it's not always used with comic book characters that have it. Sure, it's kind of harder to translate to live action to make Batman. It's like, how would you do that? Would you have it kind of the Batman versus Superman mech suit glow? Or would it actually be more of a Deadpool kind of like fabric-y kind of thing over his eyes where it has lots of little slits in it so you can actually see through, but if you're standing 5 feet away, it would just look like white eyes kind of thing? Or would it be something else entirely different? I do think they should give it a go. I do believe that costume designers these days would find a really cool way of implementing that into a bat suit, even if it is just like the white fabric, or maybe some kind of technology like a lens, something like that. It just helps make it that much more distinct, especially a Batman who's already gone through quite a bit of a Bat family. This Batman's not going to be in his 20s, so given that he's probably had multiple iterations of suits, maybe he won't have it on one suit, but maybe there'll be another suit in the film where we do get to see the white eyes. There's all kinds of possibilities like that, but personally for me, I vote for Robert Pattinson to not have white eyes. But if you're giving us a whole DC universe in the next 8 to 10 years of content with Batman, yeah, give us the white eyes, and I hope it really happens. And truly, on the most bottom line you could have, if you just really think of Robert Pattinson's Batman and the world and the Gotham that Matt Reeves has forged, and then let's just say we skip forward a few years and now we know what the DCU Batman, the Brave and the Bold trailer looks like, and you see him like proper modern comic book, white eyes and everything like that. The tone is very different from that of, you know, the kind of noir detective-driven Reeves Batman Part 2, then it is such two distinct Batmans. And despite how many people say they're going to rob from each other or one Batman's going to have a shadow cast over the other one, I actually don't think that's going to be the case, believe it or not. Call me an optimist, but I think there's going to be a lot of people going to see both movies as Batman fans, of whom are wanting to see two distinct iterations of the character, which, you know, is funny because they will be very similar in certain ways, but clearly vision-wise different, and I think this would help that just a little bit. Up next from Andy180 saying, "Hi Boba, love your content as always. Thank you, man. I want to ask, with Keaton returning, what are your hopes to hear about him during the years after returns? What has he been up to during the events before the movie? Like, did he marry Selena Kyle, have a Robin, encounter more villains, etc.? Also, do you think they'll acknowledge the Kilmer and Clooney movies? Because technically they're set in the same universe, but different actors, of course. Keep up the great work, mate. Love from Australia." So, as far as this, I'm expecting quite a few cool nods here and there. I mean, for example, in the Flash trailer or in the TV spot version of it, there's a whole room full of all different kinds of bat suits. There's one that has like an Adam West bat symbol on it. There's all kinds of different little nods here and there to different adventures that Keaton has been up to since the old days. As far as connecting it to the other Batman movies, sure, there could be a line from Keaton saying, "Oh, I remember when I did that," even though that wasn't me being that same person. But I wouldn't expect things beyond that. Now, as for like Robin, I believe in the filming for Batgirl, I don't know how many people remember this, there was like these murals of Batman in the city, and it was Michael Keaton's Batman with a young kid Robin there, like a young looking Dick Grayson. I'm not sure if I found that photo for this video, but technically that should be canon to The Flash, because, I mean, maybe not. The Batgirl movie was taking place after the original regime's vision was, okay, you got the Flash movie. When Barry runs back in time, Keaton is staying as the new Batman, Sasha Calle's Supergirl staying on as Supergirl, and then that's when we get the Batgirl movie with Brendan Fraser as Firefly, and seemingly, canonically, even though we're never going to see the movie, there was set design of spray paintings of Batman with his Robin. So Keaton went on to have a young Robin in this version of the timeline, a very kind of comic book Batman with a younger kid Robin. So I don't know if they're going to reference, since technically this same Keaton Batman who's filmed scenes for The Flash was that same Keaton in the Batgirl movie. Technically they're connected, so we could get a reference there. As far as Selena Kyle, maybe you could argue they ended up somewhere, but I've got a feeling there might be a line that says that it never quite worked out or something like that. I think in the Batcave we'll see possibly little cool trophies to villains that we never saw Keaton face off against in those movies, but that would be like a similar nod to like the room with the bunch of suits in there. So I wouldn't expect loads and loads of things, but little cool nods here and there would be really sweet. Now, I really love this comment from Brain Dead by Default saying, "Do you think the connection Bruce and Barry have with them both losing their parents will play into the story and them learning to deal with the grief?" I'm not entirely sure, but I would love a line from Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne. I mean, as we see in the trailer, Barry says to Batfleck's Bruce Wayne, you know, "I can go back and fix everything," and Bruce is just like, "Oh, you can destroy everything." You know, I love that line. It's very Conroy-esque Batman, but it'd be really cool if Bruce or Ben Affleck's Batman had a line, and this could be the case, because it's not like we've seen that whole scene. He's like, "Do you not think if I could do this, I would go back in time and maybe do that as well, Barry?" But I'm not. But you could just argue, but yeah, Bruce, you don't have the ability that I have. So maybe if you did, you'd go back in time and prevent your parents from dying. That's actually kind of an interesting story. If Batman had the ability to actually go back and change things, would he have kind of cracked like Barry does in this movie and cause Flashpoint? By the way, I kind of do half expect some kind of connection, yes, like you're saying, between Bruce and Barry, that, hey, if you do this, yes, you could destroy everything, as we heard in the trailer. But maybe some kind of, not just coming down hard on Barry, but I understand why you want to do this. Barry's still going to do it anyway, but he tries to give him a little bit of a talk to with the dangers of it, but he understands wholly why he would want to do this. I don't necessarily expect some kind of scene later on when Barry's come back and decided to let his mother die to fix everything, because we're going into a new universe where Ben Affleck is no longer Bruce Wayne, so there wouldn't be any kind of final conversation, I guess, at the end of the Flash movie when Barry runs back to try and fix everything and things are a bit different because now we're in the new DCU. I don't think there will be any kind of final conversation like, you're gonna have to deal with the grief now, Barry. I mean, you've seen it yourself. You ran back and did Flashpoint, and look how you screwed things up. Oh, and by the way, thanks for screwing me up because I'm no longer Batman in this new DCU, but you're gonna have to deal with the grief now. I mean, as you've seen it yourself, you tried to do it, but no, just accept it, like I did with my parents. Obviously, the scene wouldn't go like that, but yeah, the only opportunity I see for some kind of connection between Bruce and Barry over their parents is early on in the film, and I really do hope we get that, because seeing Bruce, or Ben Affleck's Bruce, talk about that would be really cool. Up next from Jahan Peter saying, yo Boba, do you think James Gunn is going to for sure incorporate the League of Shadows? I figure it's a given since Damian is coming, but do you think there will be any focus on them in the film? Love what Christopher Nolan did with them, but always thought there could be a really cool live action version more in line with how they are in the comics. What do you think he'll do with the League? So yeah, I mean, in the more comic accurate name, they'll be called the League of Assassins, and I do very much so believe that the League of Assassins, or the League of Shadows from Nolan's version, will be in this movie. I do think they'll be way more comic accurate than Nolan's version, for example. I doubt we're going to get into this, but I do believe the DCU's League of Assassins will actually have a Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, however you want to pronounce it, who has bathed in the Lazarus Pit. For all we know, we might get a reference to that. I don't know. But I think it would be pretty cool. Instead of the movie just picking up with a knock, knock, knock on the door of Alfred answering it and there's a kid there, and then Talia's just like, yeah, Alfred, Bruce has to deal with him now or something, and she just walks off back to Nanda Parbat or something. No. I think it'd be much more epic to... I don't know. Honestly, this is such speculation. Like, who knows how the Brave and the Bold scenes are going to unfold, but now that we're talking about it, if you could have Damian Wayne come to the doorstep of Bruce in some way, shape, or form, we don't know how they're really going to adapt that, but ultimately, they're going to be together. Bruce is going to try and steer him off the League of Assassins murderous path that he's been set on. He's been born and raised to be a killer for the League of Assassins, right? So I do think it'll be a bit of a missed opportunity if we don't somewhat pick up, or in the early part before Damian is in Bruce's life for the duration of the film, if at that before point we aren't with, the League of Assassins. I think that'd be really cool to kind of see the perspective of Damian and his mother there, maybe seeing a bit of the set location of where the League of Assassins is. It might be a really short scene. It could only be like a couple of minutes or so, but if you kind of delve into it before Damian reaches Bruce, that would be really sweet for fans to see. Oh crap, like, so here's a proper, organized League of Assassins. We're not really delving into them much in this movie, but here it is. This is the location. We're going to go back to Gotham now for the remainder of the film with Bruce. Maybe we go back to the League of Assassins later on, who knows? But seeing that location, seeing a little bit of that setup would be really incredibly interesting for fans to see. Maybe we could see Ra's al Ghul as well. That would be really interesting. Maybe he's not happy with Damian going to Bruce. Maybe he wants his grandson back, because after all, Damian Wayne is kind of the perfect heir for Ra's al Ghul, since he couldn't get the Dark Knight to become the heir, so to speak. He might be like, hey, what about my grandson? I want him back. But I don't know. Some people are thinking that Ra's al Ghul could be a villain. Maybe he could be. Maybe he could be involved in the plot somehow. I'm really not sure. But ultimately, I do think their bottom line here to answer this question is that there is quite a bit of room to show some set design, production of the League of Assassins, and maybe some important characters, rather than just Talia being like, okay, you're kind of old enough now, I'm going to send you to Gotham to meet your father. And Damian's kind of curious of that, and he's like, sure, I'll meet my dad. Don't really have too much to expect. Don't have, any ties to him. But along the way, they get closer and the film unfolds as the brave and the bold. And he volunteers to be the next Robin. I think that would be a semblance of the story, midpoint throughout or going throughout the movie. But before then, as I've kept saying, if you start off or at some point in the early film show where Damian comes from before he leaves to go to Gotham, that would be a missed opportunity if you didn't in some way show a working and operating League of Assassins. Maybe with some bigger characters as well, like Ra's al Ghul. Now up next from Ferris, he says, just a comment, but really hope they do differentiate the styles and tones for each movie, like every movie existing within the realms of a specific genre, like horror, Swamp Thing, or serial killer, thriller, Batman, and my dream DCU Batman tone would be based on Arkham Knight. That is my favorite version of Gotham, and it would be perfect for a more fantastical take on Batman and his rogues while being highly stylized. Now, I've got this quote up to just show how James Gunn has said before, and we've talked about this in previous videos, that there will be, instead of like a similar feel to like most movies in the MCU kind of thing, and I know you guys know what I mean when I say that, so to speak. He says here, even though this is all a connected universe, it's really important to me that the individual writers and directors on the projects give their own self-expression to it, just like they do in the comics. Everything doesn't always look the same. Everything doesn't always have the same expression. Different artists bring remarkably different looks, feels, and tones. This is not the Gunverse. So essentially what he's saying there, especially with that last line, this movie won't be the Gunverse. So not every movie is going to be like a Peacemaker or the Suicide Squad or, just something like that where it feels very, very similar. As you said yourself, Swamp Thing to whatever will have a very distinct tone. Swamp Thing will probably and hopefully be an R-rated horror-esque movie. It's just, funnily enough, it's set in the same universe. Superman Legacy will probably feel quite different from Batman the Brave and the Bold. I hope that actually gets practiced when they're making the movies, but at the same time, I can understand some people might be like, but what if they're so distinct that it's almost hard to imagine this character, being in the same world as this character over here? I think that will very much so work when they ultimately cross over, but I'm just ultimately very, very happy that depending on the style or tone needed for said movie, it actually doesn't matter how different it will be, so long as it works for that movie, it will still be connected in the same universe as, hey, here's a Swamp Thing horror movie with Anton Arcane and all of this mysterious stuff going on. And, the Lantern show will be completely different to that of the Authority. And yet, they're still in the same universe, whereas I would say the MCU, sure, you have, some movies that try to, make itself a bit more unique from the typical MCU formula. Most of them, whether you're watching Quantumania or you're watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier or something like that, it's, hey, yeah, this is an MCU project, Apparently, they're not going to be so hell-bent on making it feel identical, tonally, stylistically, you name it, as long as, and what I loved about his comment here, just like the comic books, it's all under the same, let's just say, the New 52 at the time, or whatever, Rebirth, or whatever iteration of the comics you're reading from. You might have one story over here, like Swamp Thing over here, but then you have, like, the New Teen Titans over here. Yeah, they're all in the same universe, but the artists, the creators behind each project, they're not thinking or trying to specifically adhere to, we need to kind of make it feel the same as that Swamp Thing comic book over there, because otherwise the audience will just be like, that's not DC, or they're not in the same universe. They're not really thinking about that. They're just thinking about how do we utilize and adapt and bring about the best iteration that's true to this character from what we know about the character to on page. And they're going to do the same thing with their efforts to adapt said and respected character on screen as well, and then think about maybe crossing them over at a certain point in the future. And one thing I think most people say about DC in general is that they do make, or the best movies they make, even though so far they've been kind of Elseworlds. So like the Dark Knight trilogy wasn't really connected to anything else. Joker, not connected to anything else. The Batman, not really connected to anything else. And when they go for those movies and they truly just try hone in on what makes that character great and how do we bring about that character in the best way we can to possibly make it definitive, that is through just truly honing in on that. And then you get these movies that a lot of DC fans praise, that their best strengths is when they're trying to just make the project for the project's sake. But when they try and make a massive cinematic, threaded and interweaved universe, or like the Gunverse, everything that's being strived towards connectability can often subtract from the creator or the individual artist's expression. And James Gunn doesn't want to compromise that. So That is the king aspect of what he's looking for. And I hope it really works out. And this way, yeah, as you're saying here, Gotham can feel very, very distinct and stylized. I mean, who knows ultimately what it will be, but it will maintain its own integrity first and foremost. So up next from Timothy Patch asking, how exactly do you think the Flash reset will work? Will it end with the Flash going into the Speed Force, or will it show him in the new world he has created? And how will it be obvious to him that the world has changed? So the way the Flash reset will work, apparently according to James Gunn, in that DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters announcement reveal video, he literally said, you know, the Flash movie, this, that, and the other, and that's where the universe resets. And he's even retweeted Heroes Reforged artwork here. It's a really cool slate picture, and I'm probably showing it on screen. You quite simply have Shazam there, the Flash, the universe reset happens, and this is probably why he literally retweeted this artwork, because it is technically a great representation, or a visual representation, I should say, of exactly what he said in that universe. Then you have Blue Beetle, Aquaman, which people are still debating if it's in the DCU, but I think it is, according to what he said. It's just arguably a prelude into where things really start kicking off with Creature Commandos, Waller, and if you're doubting those are in the DCU or not, James Gunn has literally said that Waller is in the DCU, so, you know, there's your evidence of a literal prior DCEU actor staying on in the DCU. The thing about Aquaman, I think, is that they're playing it coy right now with certain things of, will he carry on being Aquaman? You know, Aquaman was always seen as a trilogy, as the quote goes. Now, I think they're officially, even though it is post-reset, even if you don't want to say too much about it, or if you are on the side of, yes, it's in the DCU, they're going to wait until how the box office does before they really think about, okay, yeah, Aquaman 3, 100% in the DCU, we're going to continue on with that, or if maybe Jason Momoa after Aquaman 2 will kind of let that sizzle out a little bit. Yeah, maybe it might technically still be in the DCU, but really he's coming back as Lobo, and we're just going to concentrate on that, and Aquaman is just still kind of out there somewhere, but just kind of forget about him for now because we're focusing on this. I don't know. Like, there's a whole bunch of opinions out there, but what we do know is if you want to take it in a literal sense, quite literally a literal sense, and what James Gunn said, the Flash movie happens, the universe reset happens. Well, if you ask me, what's a universe reset and what's coming next? The DCU. So Blue Beetle technically does fall within the DCU, and so does Aquaman. It's just that Blue Beetle, I believe, generally has almost no ties to what's happened before. It's truly an origin story, and thus kind of works as if James Gunn actually wanted to do that character himself in the DCU. Now, he didn't handle that movie, but he's kind of lucky with how, since it's a self-contained origin story, he might be interested in keeping Shola Mardwania's Blue Beetle on. Now, I know this isn't really so much a question, but technically that is how the reset works as far as we understand it. Now, what I'm leaving room for there is why I say as far as we understand it, is because even though we know the Flash reset happens and you've still got Blue Beetle and Aquaman, I think there's some details that will be coy. For example, Aquaman 2 is what we've been over. Will it really be proper, like, stamped as DCU, even though it seems like it is? The Flash movie, will Ezra Miller really stay on as Barry Allen? But as for, like, the ending and what will make that happen is Barry, simply after all of the events of the movie, realizes that, hey, I can't really let this carry on. I ran back in time. I thought I could do it. I thought I could save my mom, but look what happened. Zod came back. There's this whole other world in danger. So I think for the most part, they're going to resolve whatever happens in that timeline. So technically in the multiverse, Barry leaves that timeline knowing that it's got a Batman, it's got a Supergirl, things will be okay. It might even have a second Flash, depends what you believe with the Dark Flash theories out there. So Barry number 2 could stay to protect that world, but he is going to run back as best as he can and restore the timeline of the DCEU. It's just that by the events of the end of the movie, when he tries to run back and make things the exact same, they won't be the exact same as what they were before in the DCEU. As we know, Ben Affleck isn't staying as Bruce Wayne, this, that, and the other. So he'll come back to some things the same and some things different. So Superman Legacy, a literal new Superman actor. But oh wait, Amanda Waller looks the same. Things like that. I think he's going to try and rectify it. He will realize that Bruce Wayne, Batfleck, was right in how he says you could almost destroy everything. So he will run back in time after he feels fairly comfortable with how things have been left off in the new timeline that he made in the movie, and where we see Keaton and Sasha Calle, Supergirl and whatnot. Runs back, and we have the new DCU. And then Blue Beetle comes out, Aquaman 2 comes out. Sure, if they don't want Ezra Miller to stay as the Flash and they kind of want to sideline Barry himself, then I guess Barry could try and restore the timeline at the end of the movie, run back, but gets stuck in the Speed Force, but nonetheless, the new universe gets made, and that is the DCU, as per the universe reset, as what's been mentioned. That way, I suppose, in-universe, you could say, oh, you know, that's why Ezra Miller's Barry isn't around anymore. But the new universe is, because he's run back and kind of helped somewhat restore the universe, even though it's a little bit different now because we've got Superman Legacy and all these other projects coming. But that way, I suppose Ezra Miller's Barry could be put on the sidelines whilst they decide whether to recast Ezra Miller or not. And if Barry makes it out the Speed Force eventually, Barry Allen could come out with a different face, and they could just blame that on Speedster, Speed Forciness. I don't know. But I kind of do like that idea. If they don't know what to do with Ezra Miller's Flash as of the end of the movie, if he runs back and tries to restore the timeline, as we know it won't be the exact same, the universe resets, we get the new DCU, but whilst he restores the timeline, he gets stuck in the Speed Force, that would be kind of an answer for like what to do for the time being. Whether they wait an extra amount of time for Ezra Miller to try and publicly restore their image, or whether that never happens and they, whenever they decide to bring back the character of the Flash into the new DCU universe, they can bring back a different actor. But I don't know if that is at all how it's going to happen. As far as we understand it, Barry, by the ending events of the movie, realizes that, hey, I need to undo all of this as best as I can, runs back, and then, oh, lo and behold, we have a new universe. And it's still similar. He tried the best he could to make things the same, but ultimately, he's never going to really be able to make things exactly the way that they once were. Now, up next, and lastly, from Jordan saying, I think Superman Legacy is the true start for the DCU canon. The reason James Gunn was being vague on the films that are still to come out this year is to not hinder their box office in any way. I think both The Flash / Aquaman and maybe even Shazam will all be recasted. Your thoughts? So this is something we've kind of already touched on in today's video, but there is a little bit more to offer here. So first of all, I'll say kind of what I said earlier and how, yes, I do think James Gunn is playing a bit coy with some things. I think Aquaman, they are truly waiting for the box office there, but at the same time, I know that, you know, we have Jason Momoa really excited after new Warner Brothers DC meetings, even teasing I can play other characters too, Savage and Charming and whatnot. So I 100% believe there's something else going on there, despite no talks of Lobo publicly after the DCU Chapter 1 video, only like indirect answers here and there being given whenever Lobo was mentioned by the press, I believe. But just like how Amanda Waller is carrying on in the DCU, I do believe it or not, the same thing with Shazam here. They're not looking to recast absolutely everyone. Somebody tweeted at David F. Sandberg, who's directed Shazam Fury of the Gods, saying, hey David, I don't feel like watching the movie because of the drama happening around DC Studios. It is just killing the vibe of the film. There's a lot of uncertainty about DC's future. Just give us an answer whether Shazam will have a role in future DCU. And he said, well, he definitely won't if people don't go see the movie. And this is most importantly what he says. What I've been told is that there is nothing in the Shazam films that contradict the future plans for DC. So the possibility for more Shazam is there. And if that's what you want, your best bet is to go see the film. And that is kind of what we've heard as well. I believe even from James Gunn saying there are certain characters of whom the door is left open for them to return. He's definitely not ruled. And I do believe this. I don't think he's ruled out Zachary Levi's Shazam. I think the same applies for Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. Obviously Momoa's Aquaman, even though I think he's got a role in one way or another, and you guys know what I'm talking about there. And they're truly waiting to see, I think, how it does ultimately. Shazam, the first one didn't make a bunch of money. The second one is projected to not make too much money either. But even with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if James Gunn still keeps the door open for Zachary Levi's Shazam to pop up at some point in the future of the DCU. And this is what David F. Sandberg has now recently said 12 hours ago from making this video, that, hey, I've been told that nothing contradicts it, so just like Amanda Waller, she's staying on. There's no reason to change her casting. He's heard the same thing for his Shazam casting in that of Zachary Levi as well. But that being said, I just think they're going to decide how hot to be on that character in the new DCU based off of the box office of Fury of the Gods, which I don't think is going to do spectacularly well, but I still wouldn't be surprised, even if it didn't do spectacularly well, that Shazam with that of Zachary Levi's Shazam will probably still have some future there. And we already know that, granted, if you want to say it's nepotism or whatever, with Peacemaker crew staying on, Amanda Waller staying on. Now we're hearing that Zachary Levi's Shazam could have a future and he's friends with Peter Safran. But one thing I've been saying this whole time is that even when the movies come out, I don't expect as soon as The Flash drops even a month or two afterwards, that James Gunn's going to be like, okay, the movie's out the way now, it's out of theaters now, Ezra's no longer our Flash. I don't think we're even going to hear about it a couple of months afterwards. I think it's going to be some time, like some time indeed. But that just about wraps it up for today's DCU Chapter 1 discussion series video. There are actually quite a few more questions that I didn't get to and I really want to get to, so let me know if you want to see another episode of this Q&A series, this discussion series. There is so much more to get into with Brave and the Bold, other stuff like Swamp Thing, the Authority, and what could be going on there and how that impacts everything. But overall, everyone, let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed in today's video. It's been a long one, so can't wait to see what your takes are. Of course, if you want to help out the channel, you can do so by just leaving a like on this video. That helps out a ton. Maybe consider subscribing, because a lot of you keep coming back. Maybe it's recommended on your homepage, but you're not actually subscribed, so at least that way you can, have it in your sub box. Maybe consider turning your notifications on so you actually get notified of videos. But until next time, everyone, just thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.